Well, guys, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm in a rare solo flight without my wife and daughter, so I can do some technical talk without driving them crazy. So one of the topics I wanted to discuss was the Rotax engine. They're a very popular engine worldwide, but here in the U.S., a lot of pilots aren't as familiar with them as they are with Lycoming and Continental. I hear a lot of misconceptions about the engines, and I'm not a super expert. I'm not a A&P. I do have a repairman license for this airplane, but I don't have a power plant license. But I have taken a number of just online seminars. EAA has a ton of them about the Rotax engines. Many of them are put on by either Phil Lockwood or his main maintenance guy there who does their teaching. You know, you can take classes at their facility down in Sebring, Florida, and I intend to do that. But in the meantime, I've taken a bunch of their seminars on EAA.org. And I took a bunch of notes, and I'm just going to share with you what I've learned about the Rotax engines and the things that make it unique and a little bit different than the legacy engines. First off, a lot of people think that Rotax is a new company, or they're new to aviation, or they're new to even building engines. They're quite an old company. They're over 100 years old. They've been making engines for a very long time. They make engines for not only aircraft, as you know, but many other vehicles for other vehicle manufacturers, including Bombardier, Buell, and BMW. And they've been making aircraft engines for about 50 years. They've sold, at the time that I saw this video, which is a few years old, they had sold over 180,000 aircraft engines. That's an outdated number now. It wouldn't surprise me if they're close to 200,000 now, if not more. And this is going to shock a lot of people. They are the world's largest piston aircraft engine producer. They supply engines to more than 200 airframe manufacturers. That represents over 80% of all the aircraft OEMs in the world. They also power many military drones, such as the U.S. Predator drone. Now, the original 9 Series Rotax was developed about 40 years ago, and it's been continually refined ever since. At the time of this seminar, which I said was a few years old, I had 70 million flying hours just on the 9 Series Rotax engines. And then the IS engine, the IS series of the 9 Series, so the 912 IS, those were launched about a decade ago. That's when they basically converted it from carbureted to fuel injected and introduced dual electronic engine computers. One of the things you hear about is, well, Rotax has a lower TBO than your typical Continental Lycoming. Well, Rotax is very cautious, and when they introduce an engine, they typically start it with a lower TBO. And then as the engines reach TBO and they get returned to the factory and they can inspect it and see what's wearing and how much it's wearing and that kind of thing. Once they determine that everything is good, they'll increase the TBO. And they did that with the 912 series, which I believe started out with a 1,200-hour TBO, and they ramped it up as they were able to inspect the returns. And now that has a 2,000-hour TBO. The 915 also was introduced with a 1,200-hour TBO. I'm hoping that as they get enough of those back, it's going to be increased to 2,000. And the 916 IS that was introduced right out of the box with a 2,000-hour TBO. So that bodes well for the future. And of course, if you're Part 91, you don't have to overhaul your engine at the TBO as long as you inspect it, and it's basically on condition. So if your airplane is for hire, or you're a flight school or that kind of thing, or if you're Part 141 or 135, then you have to go by the factory TBO. But Part 91, you don't have to. And a lot of people have went well beyond TBO on their Rotax engines. There's a tremendous track record of Part 91 aircraft going
vertical track,
going beyond TBO, the Rotax TBO. And they've got Rotax 9 Series engines that have gone as much as 4,000 hours without an overhaul. A few of the differences that are unique to Rotax and give it some advantage over the legacy engine: they're smaller, lighter, and more efficient with a better power to weight ratio than similar power Lycoming or Continentals. They use a dry sump oil system that requires less oil. The thing only carries just like about 3.5 quarts of oil or so compared to 8. And that makes the engine smaller and lighter. One of the big advantages is the crankcase is not vented, and that helps prevent corrosion. If you think about the life of an aircraft, there's 8,760 hours in a year, and the average general aviation plane flies maybe 50 to 100 hours. And even if you're a high-time guy and you fly 200, 250, 300 hours a year, your aircraft is still sitting most of the time. I changed my fuel tanks here, excuse me. Fuel pressure's good. So that means your airplane is sitting a lot. Now, while the legacy engine sits, atmospheric moisture can get inside of the engine and corrode the internals. You don't have that issue with the Rotax. It doesn't have the vented crankcase. Also, the cylinder walls are coated with Nicocil. It's an extremely hard ceramic, which is harder than steel, that can be dissolved into nickel. And that's another thing that prevents the corrosion. So most legacy engines have iron cylinder walls, so they rust when they sit. And that's why many legacy engines require a top overhaul long before they get to their TBO. That's virtually unheard of in the Rotax world. You don't typically hear of a Rotax engine getting a top overhaul. Rotax engines have very tight manufacturing tolerances. The tolerance on the distance between the piston and the cylinder on a new Rotax is a maximum of 8/10,000ths of an inch. That's less than a hair width. The cylinders are air-cooled, but the cylinder heads are liquid-cooled. That allows the engine to run at a more consistent temperature, and that's one reason that it can operate with such tight tolerances, much tighter than a legacy engine. Also, the cylinder and piston are made out of the same metal alloy, so you don't have differential expansion and contraction with heating and cooling. And that's another reason a Rotax can have a tighter tolerance. The tolerance stays the same as the engine warms up and cools down. In a legacy engine, because the piston and cylinder are made with dissimilar metals, they have to design the piston and cylinder dimensions to be where they need to be when it's at operating temperature, which is about 380 degrees Fahrenheit. But when it cools down below 250, there's a lot of slop between the piston and the cylinder. And that leads to piston slap, which can lead to wear and tear on the engine. And that's not an issue on a Rotax. And that's why the engine has no problem running at 5,500 RPM all day long. You know, I hear people saying, well, that engine running at such a high RPM, there's no way it can last as long as a Lycoming or Continental. Well, it can for all the reasons I just mentioned. And that's also another reason that Rotax owners don't need to break in their engines. The break-in is done by the factory. And it's just ready to fly when you get the engine. The other question you hear a lot is, why a geared engine? What's the advantage of that? Well, piston engines are most efficient and have the optimal torque at higher RPMs. Propellers have their optimum thrust at lower RPM. So older engines operate at a constant state of compromise. It's an RPM that's neither optimal for the engine nor the prop. But higher RPM, you can get more power with less displacement. And because the combustion events are happening basically twice as often as a legacy engine. So the gearbox allows the Rotax to operate at the most optimal RPM for both the engine and the prop. And on the 915, it's a 2.54 to 1 ratio between the engine speed and the prop speed. So a 2,500 RPM engine speed is 1,000 RPM prop. A lot of times I'm on the taxiing on the ground at 2,500 RPM. That sounds high to someone who's used to a Continental or Lycoming, but that's equivalent to 1,000 prop RPM, which is kind of what you typically taxi at Lycoming or Continental. Also, the gearbox has an overload clutch, and that prevents engine damage if you had a prop strike. So if you do have a prop strike, typically it doesn't require an engine tear down like old engines do or legacy engines. And Rotax has been making gearboxes for even longer than they've been making engines, so they're very well designed and durable. The other thing people ask is, well, isn't it loud because it's at a high engine RPM? And most of the noise comes from your prop, and your prop is at a lower RPM in a Rotax than it is in a legacy engine. The takeoff RPM on this, well, you're 5,800 on the engine, but the prop RPM at takeoff is about 2,280, and your cruise RPM is between 2,000 and 2,150. So some of the misconceptions about Rotax engines stem from the older Rotax engines. You know, they had some old 2-cycle engines. A lot has changed since then. In fact, the 915 has almost no components in common with the carbureted, even the 9 series Rotax engines. It is turbocharged. It's not turbo normalized. I hear that misconception a lot. Turbo normalized means it holds sea level pressure as you go up in altitude. This turbocharged means it's boosted above sea level pressure, and that's what the 915 and 916 do. It boosts your manifold pressure well above sea level pressure, and then it can hold that all the way up to 15,000 feet. The advantage of the IS engine versus the older carbureted 9 series engines: there's no carb sinking, there's no carb float issues, there's no carb icing. Basically, all the issues with carburetors are gone because the carburetor's gone. You got dual electronic fuel injection instead. There's no choke, there's no separate hot and cold start procedures, and vapor lock is virtually eliminated between the Rotax pumps and the engine with the fuel injection. Now, there can be issues with MoGas, and I'm going to talk about that in another video, but that is an issue of the delivery from the tanks to the Rotax pumps, so you can't really blame Rotax for that. You may have heard of old crankcase issues with the older Rotax, and those have basically been eliminated since 2006. Alright, some of the things about the computers, the engine computers. The IS engines launched about a decade ago. They're FADEC, Full Authority Digital Engine Control. The engine management system consists of the ECU, the control unit, each control unit with 2 modules, lane A and B. And each one's capable of taking control over the engine and regulating and monitoring the engine. The computers analyze multiple data points and parameters 10 times a second. The mixture is handled automatically. When you go into eco mode, it effectively goes lean of peak. If you go higher than that, it goes rich of peak automatically. So it protects the engine. Critical components have redundancy, so there's 2 generators, there's 2 ECUs, there's 2 fuel injection systems, there's 2 ignition systems. There's 2 injectors per cylinder. They alternate pulsing. And the computer monitors the resistance and the current, and if anything's outside of the parameters, it flags that injector. The computer also compares the combustion event by monitoring EGT. If it sees a problem, it'll automatically isolate the bad injector and double pulse the good one to compensate. The engine will continue to run normally, and it doesn't even reduce efficiency in that case. It can still run in eco mode with a clogged injector. If you did get a lane light, you go to the engine page, hit menu, hit FADEC information, and it'll tell you what's the diagnosis, what's the reason why you have a lane light. Anyway, there's more to say, but I got to get ready to start the descent, and that's a little quick rundown of what makes the Rotax engines unique.